Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call the Finance and Audit Committee meeting to order. I'd like to recognize we are gathered on the traditional territory of the Snuneymuxw First Nation. Our clerk this morning will be Ms. Sheila Gurry, who I keep looking to my right to see, but she's escaped to my left, and that's okay. Today's Finance and Audit Committee meeting will be held in accordance with the Community Charter and Council Procedure Bylaw 2018, number 7272. Question period sign-up sheet is on the table by the double doors to my left for agenda items only. If during the meeting any member of the gallery has a question regarding an agenda item, would you please write down your name and the agenda item on the sheet? Members have been granted the authority to join electronically, and I want to welcome Councillor Armstrong, looking all chipper and happy on the big screen. Not seeing anyone else. Introduction of late items, Ms. Gurry. We don't have any.
That's correct, Your Worship.
Motion for adoption of the agenda. Moved Councillor Perino, seconded Councillor Manley. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Motion for adoption of the minutes is circulated. Moved Councillor Perino, seconded Councillor Hemmons. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion's adopted. We have no presentations, we have no delegations, but we do have a number of reports. And the first is 7A, the 2023 Travel Assistance Grants Overview. Ms. Osborne, nice to see you again. Another long day for you. Please.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. I'm here this morning to provide you with an information report on our 2023 Travel Assistant Grant that were administered over the last few months. The City of Nanaimo offers travel assistance grants to teams and cultural organizations who travel to participate in regional, national, international championships. This year, we saw the return of many of our teams successfully competing at that level. And that was nice to see after a couple of years where competitions and performances came to a halt. So we did see 10 applications that we were able to offer compensation to 9 or assistance to 9 of those organizations. And we were able to deplete our fund this year, which is nice. We have $7,500 in our travel assistant grant fund. And we offer, depending on how far they're going, either $50 or $100 per participant if they're citizens of Nanaimo. We do not fund chaperones or coaches, simply the players who are participating or performing. We did have 3 organizations that applied after the funds were depleted, and we were not able to assist them with their travel. And I think that that speaks to this grant and the popularity of it. The last couple of years, we did not, as I mentioned, administer funds, but prior to, we were seeing an increase in requests for assistance. In 2019, we actually had recommendation or a request for up to $16,000 in assistance, and we depleted the fund that year as well. What's unique about this fund is it is a grant that we administer as the events occur, so it's first come, first serve, and when the funds are depleted, then we no longer have the ability to assist those organizations. So this year, as I said, we were successful. We depleted the fund, and we were able to assist 9 teams or organizations that represented our city at various levels. I'm open for any questions.
Thank you very much. Councillor Thorpe.
Oh, thanks, Your Worship.
Sportsman.
No, first, my apologies for being late. Had trouble finding a parking spot in our downtown parkades. Thank you, Ms. Osborne. I really think this is a valuable program. My question goes to the the application process. My understanding is that it's a once a year, and the funding is given out first come, first serve. Okay. So for groups that determine a need later on in the calendar year, and by the time they do that and apply, it could well be too late and then the fund has been used up. Is there any thought to adapting the process to maybe make it more fair to those groups that find out their need later in the calendar year?
Through the mayor to Councillor Thorpe, you are correct. It is a first come, first served basis at this moment. And it has typically run out prior to the end of the year. We are doing a review of our grant process and looking at the various different grants that Parks, Recreation and Culture administers. And that is one of the criteria that we are going to specifically be reviewing and possibly changing for the future.
Thanks. I know it would be difficult, to be fair to everybody, but just a thought. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
And if I may please, and to follow along on what Councillor Thorpe's raised, in terms of the applicants, I wonder if you can comment, are we getting sort of quote unquote the same groups, schools, et cetera, annually because they're aware of it and have had it before? Or are you seeing applicants who are not what I'll call regular or traditional applicants?
Very good question also. I did go back to look and see who we had been providing the assistance to since back as far as 2015, 2016. And it is quite an array of various different groups. And I think that speaks to whether or not, some years perhaps boxing is excelling and maybe the next year it's the Nanaimo Youth Choir. So there is a variation. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And appreciate the response to Councillor Thorpe, because it is pretty unreasonable that, the successful team or whatever that has a chance to go and shine for the city might face challenges getting the money to do so, even though they've obviously worked hard to succeed. So much appreciated this morning. If no further questions, the recommendation is that, no recommendation, we're just in the report. The next is the 2024 project contingency allocation. Ms. Mercer, good morning. Welcome.
Good morning. Currently, the 2023 budget includes a few contingency budgets in a couple of departments. So we have some contingency budgets in Public Works, Police Services, as well as some money for developer cost shares that come up during the year. So the city has a budget transfer policy that allows funding to be moved between projects throughout the year. And depending on the timing and or type of funding, it is not always possible to move funding from projects that are completed. So therefore, these contingency budgets are used to address smaller developer cost shares, changes in scope, new project opportunities, or cost overages. So it gives a little bit of a buffer for unexpected smaller dollar items. These contingency budgets ensure that projects can proceed in a timely manner without having to return to council for the smaller dollar ones or canceling other planned projects that would make funding available. So in an effort to be consistent and flexible in addressing project overages and opportunities, staff are recommending that a single project contingency budget for the general fund be set up so all departments can have access to it if necessary. So the recommendation is to create just one general fund contingency budget in the amount of $870,000, and that's calculated at 3% of the total 2024 general capital plan budget. And of course, this would be recalculated on an annual basis because the capital plan changes, the dollars change each year. The suggested funding of it is from the 2023 surplus, as we know that there is going to, based on our Q2 and our upcoming Q3, we'll have enough money in surplus to fund it. And then the recommendation also is asking for council to endorse this funding approach for future year budgets. So when we come back next year for the 2025 contingency, it would be budgeted from the 2024 surplus. Of course, there are some other funding sources listed in the report as well if council wasn't keen on funding from surplus. There's the Strategic Infrastructure Reserve, property taxation, or canceling 2024 projects to fund it. But from a staff perspective, it's more palatable to fund it from surplus. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have regarding this report.
Thank you very much. Our reliable Councillor Perino has a question.
Thank you, Your Worship. Quick question through you to Ms. Mercer. So when is it that we find out where the overage is and where the unders were? Is that at the end of the year? I'm trying to think of when we saw the final numbers. Is that when that happens?
Right. So through Your Worship to Councillor Perino, on a quarterly basis, we give you an update on the status of projects.
Okay.
So you'll get a bit of an idea at that point. We do come back in February, early March with carry forwards and that kind of information. So if we're transferring during the year, we have a quarterly, we have a quarterly report on this one. So there are many different ways you'll get bits and pieces of that information.
Right, I like this, I think it's a good plan. I just wondered, will we always be kept up to, what is coming in on budget and what isn't?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Ms. Mercer. So we're collapsing two contingency funds to create a bigger contingency fund that all departments can access. So where is the money from the current contingency funds going? Is that going into the new project contingency?
Through your worship to Councillor Hemmons. So we would, that money has just been freed up to fund other projects within the capital plan. So we've taken that money to fund other items, and then we will add this budget and fund it from the surplus. And Ms. Fuller can answer that more fully than I can.
That covers it.
Oh, come on, let Ms. Fuller have a...
Well, I have other questions. Please, go ahead.
Ms. Fuller, welcome.
Good morning. Through the chair to Councillor Hemmons. So currently right now, when we do the project plan, we have a base funding from council that you give us from property taxation to fund projects. And because project contingency money needs to be super flexible, that means we always use property tax money to fund those contingency budgets. So each year it's getting tougher and tougher to fund our project plan, especially with now Community Works. We don't know what's going to happen with that program. We hope it's going to be renewed, but we don't know what that program will look like, so we can't count on that funding. So we're having a lot of challenges balancing the project plan. So when staff met, we don't want to cancel priority projects to fund a contingency, and so that's why we're coming to you asking to use surplus to do that. Contingency funding is important. It allows staff to react quickly to opportunities that come up. It also means we're not coming to council when we need $5,000 for a project. So it's a priority for staff, but there's no projects that we feel it's appropriate to cut to add that contingency in this year. So that's why we're looking at a change in process so that we can complete all those priority projects staff have identified, but still have that flexibility.
Okay, thank you. Great answer. Will we still have project contingencies? I'm noting the report that, well, it says all projects will continue to have a contingency built in. So every project is going to have its own, and then we're going to have this general access. Okay, and we're switching from taxation to Community Works funds potentially, or pardon me, I'm sorry, surplus, because contingency budgets are going up. Just kind of curious, I don't think we've ever had to debate a contingency piece like this before. It's usually built into projects and we either meet it or we don't. And so I'm guessing we're seeing cost overruns, and so we're building in this bigger contingency for projects. Is that accurate?
Through the chair to Councillor Hemmons. So all projects have a contingency budget built into them, but project budgets are also set well in advance of when we go out to market. So costs can change, scope can change, things can come up in the project, we can hit rock, and it's not substantial enough that we're going to come back and ask for more money for reserves, but we need a little more money. And stuff also happens during the year. We might have a failure of an HVAC system we weren't planning on. So we don't want to have to cancel another project just to fund that HVAC repair, and we can't say we can't do it. So these contingency budgets allow us to respond to the stuff that happens during the year. And moving to the surplus idea, that means it's flexible money, because surplus money we can use for anything, because that's one of the challenges with reserves. We have all these statutory reserves, but you can only use it for this. So having contingency money that's super flexible, we can use it for any type of project. It doesn't matter if it's renewal or if it's a new opportunity that comes along, we can take advantage of it. So using surplus money gives us that flexibility. You could also fund it from your SIR, because that's very flexible money, but then that's going to limit your opportunities in 2024 for other things that come along. And we're still going to come with the budget in November, and there's lots of decision points for council, and you might want to take advantage of some of those using your SIR. So we don't want to restrict you now by taking money from your SIR, and then you have less flexibility when you see the draft budget. So using surplus is a good way, and if we don't use all the contingency money, it will go back into reserves at the end of 2024, so then council can direct it to other projects or initiatives.
Thank you. And I just want to be really clear, I'm not debating the contingency fund. I think that's vital and really important in today's economic market particularly. I'm just curious how it works, so thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gesselbrock.
Thanks, Worship. just if we provide this recommendation now, will this become a decision point in the budget deliberations coming up, or does this lock us into doing it now?
Through your worship to Councillor Gusserbrock, this would be how we would go forward. It wouldn't be a decision point. This would be a decision made, and that's how we would budget going forward.
Okay. I guess, yeah, I feel a little bit of hesitancy because, like, basically this is committing this next year's surplus to this.
A portion.
Okay. Yeah, a portion of it. I guess, I know there's been some talk of like looking at our whole capital planning process and capital projects, sort of doing this outside of the context of that. I feel a little bit hesitant to do it, and curious if there's any merit of reviewing our capital project plan first and then doing this, or is this projects this year that are contingent on having this money available?
Through your worship to Councillor Gusserbrock. So I don't see this as impeding anything if we want to look at how we present capital or how we budget for capital. I don't see this as changing that in any way. I think the contingency budget is it's necessary. And this just kind of removes it from that pot of funding that is available to budget for projects. So I see it as a better way to fund contingency and leave more money available for the actual projects that we have costing for.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hemmons moves the recommended motion, seconded by Councillor Perino. Any further discussion? Not seeing any. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. And while you're in front of Council, I just want to say publicly, Ms. Mercer, I see another answer to a challenging question from a voter and resident of Nanaimo, and I just want to say how much that Council appreciates the work of you and staff when it comes to responding to those interesting and challenging questions that are often raised by voters about budgets and expenditure and interest costs and everything else. It is appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, the next is the design commercial project update. Mr. Corson, good morning, welcome.
Morning, Your Worship.
Morning.
So today we just want to give you a bit of an update on the Commercial Street project. And Council will recall that this is that all this work really originated back in July of 2019 when we had a session with you about downtown and tried to understand your priorities. And one of the things that came up at that time was improvements to the public realm. And then subsequently we had the tool design group came in and did a lot of work with staff and council as well as the community to come up with a bit of a vision for the street. And where we're at now is we're in the process of moving forward with implementing that vision. So Mr. Knight from our engineering department has been working really closely on this project. He's put a lot of passion and energy into it. So we've asked him to speak to it today. So I'll leave it to him. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning and welcome. And I just want to say before we get started, that was a very interesting process. I thought that was a great process, actually. Thank you. Please.
Good morning, everyone. I'm pleased to have the opportunity to present an update to the committee about the design commercial project. And I'm going to start with some project background, and then I'm going to move into where we're at today. So the creation of the project came from a number of factors. One of those factors are the various initiatives that are happening downtown, such as the Terminal Avenue upgrades, the Transit Exchange, redevelopment of the former Gene Burns and A&B Sound sites. And with all these projects, it became apparent that we really needed to develop a unified design vision for the area. If you take a walk down Commercial Street as it stands today, you can see there's quite a variety of surface finishes that have been used over the years, and this mix of finishes creates a sort of a disjointed and kind of a tired look to the area. There's also a need to replace some of our capital assets within the project area. For instance, the water main on Commercial Street needs to be replaced. And there's a number of trees in the area that whose roots are heaving the sidewalks, creating tripping hazards and as well as barriers to mobility. On top of that, we've also been hearing from the community that that downtown is still considered the heart of the city, and that there is a desire to promote a thriving and creative downtown with integrated space for events and gatherings. So this project really provides us with an opportunity to refresh this important area of downtown and to enhance the public realm space on Commercial Street, and as well as enhancing the opportunities for community events. So the design work began in November of 2022 with a series of focused stakeholder meetings and public events. These events included workshops, meetings, walking tours, open houses, as well as online surveys. Through the consultation process, we developed 9 guiding design principles. These principles were based entirely on the input received. There was another round of meetings and open houses in February of 2022, and from this a concept plan was produced, and a final report and concept plan were received by council at the June 20th, 2022 meeting. So the design principles, what we heard was that the space needs to be connected, convenient, comfortable, engaging, accessible, legible, safe. As far as accessible goes, we did meet with the Advisory Committee on Accessibility and Inclusiveness early on in the process, and we received some excellent feedback from them, and that feedback, wherever possible, has been incorporated into the design. We also heard that the space needs to be equitable and flexible, and again, creating a more flexible, event-ready space is a theme that keeps recurring throughout this process. Since the beginning of this year, we've been working with the design team to develop a functional design for Commercial Street from Tideline Park to Dallas Square Park. And we've just recently received detailed designs for Phase 1 and Phase 2, not including Diana Krall Plaza. The functional and detailed design continue to draw upon those 9 design principles. So this slide shows the Phase 1 area, and this slide and the next few slides show how these principles have been incorporated into the design. So what we're proposing is a flexible curbless street that is event ready. The design recognizes pedestrian priority and is sensitive towards the needs of those facing mobility challenges. The design includes buried structural soil cells, which will help trees thrive and prevent their roots from growing upwards and damaging the sidewalk. And the flexibility built into the design will also benefit local businesses by providing more options for using their storefront areas. We've added lighting elements to create a more inviting space in the evenings, and the smooth surface treatments will lend a unique and contemporary feeling to the street. And here we see another rendering of what the street will look like at the intersection of Commercial and Bastion. And you can see that the rainbow crosswalks that we have now has been replaced with a mural covering the entire intersection. We've been continuing with our consultation throughout the design process.
Nice picture.
Pardon me?
Nice picture.
Thanks. Bill wasn't sure he wanted to use it, but we convinced him. So we've been continuing the consultation process, and this year we've met with the Pride Society, the Royal Canadian Legion. Bill and I have met personally where possible, one-on-one with downtown merchants in the Phase 1 and Phase 2 area, the DNVA, and also, as you can see, we had a booth at the night market this year and last year. And feedback, particularly at the night market and from local merchants, has been overwhelmingly positive. So outlined in orange here is the Phase 1 area, which goes from the Bastion Commercial intersection to the Great National Lands Building. And Phase 2 currently consists of Diana Krall Plaza and the streetscape from Skinner and Wharf to the Bastion commercial intersection. There's an opportunity to expand phase 1 to include the streetscape portion of phase 2. And when I say an opportunity, what I mean is that we do have detailed design for that entire area. So phase 1 could be extended from Skinner and Wharf to Chapel Street, or Church Street, I should say. And here we see the phasing plan for the overall project, and this is what's shown in the staff report, and it's reflective of the capital plan.
Councillor Eastmere has a question.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Carry on, sorry,
Okay.
should wait till the end.
Of course, at the will of council, there could be a reordering of the phasing if, for instance, we wanted to accelerate the work in front of the former Gene Burns and A&B Sound sites to reflect the construction schedules of those projects. Getting into the costs, the current budget that we have for phase 1 is $1.8 million, and the detailed design estimates came in at $3.6 million. For phase 2, excluding Diana Krall Plaza, so just the streetscape from Skinner to Bastion is $2.2 million. So the expanded phase 1 could be $5.8 million. Would be if those two phases are condensed. And as far as future phases go, we also have some estimates, but you should keep in mind that these are in today's dollars. We can accept variances based on inflation and depending on what year they're constructed, as well as unknown market conditions. But our hope is that once phase 1 has been constructed, we'll have a better understanding of the costing required for the future phases.
Councillor Manley, do you want to ask your question now or later? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just, so these budget costs, are these include the works for sewer, water, all those upgrades? Okay,
Yeah,
everything's,
it's all civil works.
yeah, okay. There was a bit of sticker shock. Thanks.
And here we're seeing the schedule. So if budget is approved for phase 1 of Commercial Street, we could go out to tender in early November and have the contract awarded by the end of the year, with construction starting early next year. And during construction, you can see future phases will be under design while construction is taking place. And as well as that, for context, other downtown projects are shown here, just to see the considerable amount of work that's taking place downtown over the next year.
Thank you very much. Councillor Eastmere.
Thank you. Thank you. Through you, I wonder, does the budget also include the raisable bollards and the light features that are included in the design drawings?
Yeah, through the chair, yes, it does.
And would the raisable bollards also be on, would they be on both sides of that central intersection?
Yeah, so what we looked at during the design was, our first idea was just to put the retractable bollards in front of stores that are, in front of the restaurants, because they have their patio spaces there. But as we engaged the community, it turned out that many of the business owners loved the idea, and so we decided to put along the entire street area. So yeah, both sides of the street along where the gutter line is.
Okay, so they're actually along the side, the parking area, because I was envisioning that they were just sort of across the intersection where the road gets closed off for the night market, but you're saying they actually go all the way along the sidewalk?
Yeah, through the chair, both cases are correct. So the idea of having the retractable bollards along the gutter line is that the storefronts can use the area in front of their business for either parking or for events. And they can change it throughout the year or even throughout the day.
And how are the retractable bollards controlled? Who has the button?
Bill wanted it on at his computer, but
Mr. Corson.
no. So there'll be locking bollards, and the key will be held by someone at the city, and they're physically pulled up and retracted.
So, Your Worship, the idea is right now with the patio spaces for the restaurants, they're essentially dedicated to that restaurant for the entire year. But when the weather is poor, you don't use your outdoor space. So what'll happen is so essentially any of the stores if they need a patio space, we'll pull the bollards up for them, which then removes a parking space and creates a dining area that's safe. If in a day like today, you don't need a patio, the bollards go down and we regain a parking space. On an event day, depending on your store, you might want the bollards up, etc. So it just gives that flexibility. There are bollards at the end, I think where you were coming from, that on an event day, you can actually just close off Commercial Street quite easily. And so that was kind of two purposes of the bollards.
Gotcha. And sorry, another question about the bollards is, are they like an electrified thing, or is it just like a manual, like you raise it up? I'm just wondering how
You can choose either.
high tech are we going? Because I feel like the high tech option sounds nice, but also sounds like really expensive.
Yeah, we're going with the manual version.
Awesome.
But the button idea did seem kind of fun.
Okay. And then just looking at the design drawing, like for example, in front of Modern Cafe, it looks like there's a lot of like light standards and benches where the sort of usable patio space that they have right now. So I just really wonder about that particular section, because that is a really popular section where we have a lot of use of that street for their patio right now.
Yeah, through the chair, I think when you look at this rendering, I think what it's supposed to represent is those chairs are the Modern's patio space.
I see. Okay.
And Your Worship, so we've sat down with Melange and with the Modern and been very specific to ensure that they retain the same capacity and at least the same number of seats and chairs, so their businesses are unaffected. So.
Okay, thank you. And if I may, the places to perch idea, is it places to perch for alliteration's sake, or do you mean places where people can sit? Like, I really want to make sure that this the design that we're approving doesn't build in elements of hostile architecture, because I want the downtown to be welcoming. People should be able to come sit for long periods of time, and make it welcoming for everyone, regardless of economic background. So yeah, the places to perch thing, I was like, is that thinly veiled language, or?
Through the chair, no, it's not meant to be veiled language. I believe it was just for the sake of alliteration.
Okay.
It literally means benches. So there's the benches that are on top of the concrete, planters, as well as freestanding benches.
Cool. I do love the alliteration, so thank you for that. I'll let some other people ask questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I must say I observed in Italy recently the use of bollards to protect for pedestrian use during the day and then open it up for vehicular traffic. Local people who live in the neighborhoods, they have a fairly impressive system. So good on you for incorporating this as part of the design. In order, Councillors Gesselbrock, Manley, Perino, and Eastmere again.
Great, thank you. I just had a question. I think about it more on days like this, but is there any program or part of this with awnings for, like, I remember when we had the folks presenting about having awnings that are like useful in the sense that they extend far enough to protect you from the rain. Because I think that would be a major enhancement in terms of bringing people downtown, especially during the more winter months, if you can walk along without getting soaked. So I'm just curious if any consideration's been given to that, or are we going to have a separate program to help businesses extend their awnings? Thank you.
Yeah, through Your Worship. So yes, that was a really good point they raised, and making sure they were all consistent and actually useful. So they're not included in this because they're attached to the private property, so we would need to have a separate program to do that. Yeah, so that's something we can certainly investigate and come back with some ideas for you.
Great, I definitely think that'd be worthwhile and a good investment. Thank you.
Councillor Manley.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm curious about other parts of the design. I know there's the Big Pride mural in the street, and I've noticed that Ladysmith has done a few different murals for reconciliation, for the Legion. Are those considerations for like Dallas Square, for example, or other parts of the street as we go forward?
Yeah, through the chair. So all we have right now as far as detailed design is for phase one, but definitely we're meeting with the Legion and other groups, and I can see art being incorporated, but at this moment, we don't have a design for Dallas Square Park.
Okay. And then just back to some of the questions about design, the sidewalk, where the bollards are going to be going, there's going to be where the curb is going to be removed, so it's kind of a flat area. Is that correct? And then so the bollards will be in there for parking. Is there something that's going to stop people from pulling right up onto the sidewalk if they're parking as well? Is there a series of bollards, or how's that?
So the bollards are going, sorry, through the chair, bollards are going roughly where the gutter line is. So you can see that sort of gray strip on this rendering. And as far as the sidewalk goes, it is flush, but there is a furnishing zone. So where the benches are, the trees are, the planters are, and the as well as streetlights will create a physical barrier.
Okay. And as this goes through phase to phase, it's going to be sewer, waterworks in each one of these phases. It's going to be kind of interesting, like ripping up the street in pieces. We're going to...
Yeah, through the chair, the water main is being replaced. The sewer system is still in good condition, so the existing is remaining.
And so that is going to happen over each one of these phases. The water main will be replaced.
Correct.
Okay. Thanks.
Councillor Perino.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have 3 questions for you. You actually mentioned this, but I just didn't catch it. I'm very familiar with using trees, of course, on city streets, and the fact that we only want them to have a certain lifespan so the roots don't, grow too much. What did you say about the trees on your plans?
Through the chair, I'm really glad you asked that question because I find it pretty exciting. But what we're installing are some soil cells, which I don't think I can really describe them very well, but I kind of think of them as like plastic milk crates stacked on each other. And so you can put soil underneath there that is not compacted, and the cells themselves will form the base for the road. So you build the road over top of it, and they're strong enough that you can drive trucks across them. But the soil underneath is uncompacted, and the trees have enough area for their roots to spread out. So as far as the trees are concerned, they're growing out in nature.
And about a 20-year lifespan for them? Is that kind of the idea?
I don't actually know the lifespan for them. You mean for the trees or the cells themselves?
No, the trees. No, the trees. It's just, I'm familiar with this from past political experience, and it's just, we were told, you have to have trees that only have a lifespan so long because of the root system. So but the cell should stop it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Next question is, during the construction phase, will the road be closed?
Yes, the road will be closed, but access to all businesses will be open at all times during construction.
Given the sticker shock, are we talking about scaling back at all?
Are we
phase 1?
Talking about
scaling back the project?
No.
Okay.
Your Worship, we have a couple options for you. So
okay.
We have the phase 1,
yes.
which is from the sidewalk up to the Great National Land Building. And then our recommendation is that you actually do from Dynacrawl Plaza all the way. So if you wish to just do phase 1, or none, but if you just wish to do phase 1, it'd be this part from the intersection of Commercial and Bastion. If you wish to do the extra piece, which we recommend, it would be from Dynacrawl Plaza up. And then we'll be doing design work on Dynacrawl Plaza end of this year, early next year, and that would be a 25 project.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Through you, thank you, sir, for your presentation. Very exciting. I wanted to go back to the, you don't need to flip back, but the slide regarding consultation, which I think is absolutely crucial with our downtown merchants. And I think it's fair to say that our downtown merchants in recent years have not had a solidified or vocal presence in these chambers. So I just want to be assured that the consultation will be ongoing with the people that actually operate businesses along Commercial Street that will be the ones most affected by these changes. And we talk about things like canopies, which might be a good idea, but I know that some business owners would prefer not to have them. You mentioned the road closure, which is going to seriously impact the businesses along Commercial. So I guess my question is, I hope the answer is yes, that these business owners will be continually apprised of what is happening and asked for their ongoing input.
Through the chair to Councillor Thorpe, absolutely, we're going to keep them apprised of what's going on and keep them engaged. Like I said, Bill and I have met with a number of the business owners downtown, and they have my number and they have my email address, and they continue to contact me, and I'd like to continue to develop that relationship with them for sure.
All right, thank you. And if I may, Your Worship, Phase 5, and I heard you say that the Dallas Square, and I'm not positive whether it's technically a park or not, but Dallas Square, the design is yet to be determined. I know there was serious concerns raised about the possibility of some type of water park feature there and actually shifting the cenotaph, which raised real flags for our Legion members. So have you had meetings regarding Phase 5? Is that still off in the distance, or has there been any decisions made in that part of the project?
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Thorpe, we have met with the Legion, and their concerns were raised and heard for sure, and they were quite strongly against moving the cenotaph in any way or creating a water feature. And our message to them was that we weren't going to do anything like that without their blessing. So we're going to continue to work with them. And Phase 5 is, I think, maybe 7 years forward in the plan. So hopefully through that we can find out what they would like to see and what we can do to Dallas Square Park that will enhance their use of that space.
Thank you very much. And certainly the Legion members that I have spoken with have told me that they were quite satisfied with the conversations they had with you. So that's good news. Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you. Councillor Eastmere and then Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe asked my main question about ongoing consultation with downtown business owners, so I think that's a really important piece. With the trees that we see in the slideshow, is that a representation of what they would look like a couple of years on, or is that sort of the size that we're targeting to plant initially?
Through the chair, yeah, there'll be smaller trees at first, so these are showing more mature trees. But my understanding is that these soil cells really promote growth, and the trees will grow a lot faster than they would if they were just put into regular downtown amounts of soil.
And with the trees that you mentioned are heaving the sidewalk, is there any opportunity to save the existing trees by sort of building around them, or?
Through the chair, a lot of the trees need to be removed. Well, first of all, they don't have the right volume of soil, and some of them are just, they haven't been doing very well, and some are not in a line with where the rest of the furnishings are. So wherever possible, we're retaining the trees, but I would say that a number of them have to go. In the Phase 1 or the expanded Phase 1 area, we have 7 trees existing and 2 will be retained. But in the end, there's going to be a total of 21 trees where 7 exist now.
Okay, cool. And do you have any insight on the Great National Land Building and like what it is now, or do we know what's up with that building? For just the entire time I've been here, it seemed like a big, beautiful, nothing of a building, which, you know, it's almost like this entire project leads to that building, so it'd be nice if it was something.
Yeah, through your worship. Yeah, so it's privately owned. The building has been bits of it are actively seeking tenants. The challenge is it is an older building and it needs some renovations on the inside. So we have had different folks look at it. The Hello folks looked at it as an option for their business, but again, the renovations were just quite significant. So that's the challenge right now from an accessibility modernization piece. So yeah, it is a gorgeous building, and I agree with you. Everything leads up to that building, and you kind of almost naturally want to go into it, right? And what's in that space. So hopefully the time will come where the from a land economics perspective, it makes sense to make the investment in there, and it becomes a, interesting restaurant or shops, wherever it could be.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for the presentation. I really like the project. I have a budget question. So we have funds in this year's budget for phase 1, but not enough funds. And then we're also being asked to contemplate the acceleration of phase 2, which is additional funds, which could potentially lead to a request for further funds. So when will the financial decision come to council for this project?
Next item.
Thanks, Bill. Huh, okay, that's all. Thank you.
I think Councillor Hemmons thought it was just a report.
Oh, right, okay.
Thank you very much. Any further questions on this? If not, thank you for the presentation. It's very exciting. And I'm going to stick my neck out. I must admit, when I saw the plan for Dallas Square with the water feature and moving the cenotaph, I appreciate the concerns of Legion, but I thought it looked wonderful and was far more accommodating to the public participation on Remembrance Day, but that can's kicked down the road happily politically, so we'll leave it at that. The next is the Growing Communities Fund allocations. Ms. Mercer.
Thank you. So in March of this year, the city received $16,088,000 in funding through the Growing Communities Fund. And this fund was created to provide a one-time grant to help local governments prioritize local infrastructure and amenity projects to enable community growth. So to date, a total of $5.1 million has been allocated. $3 million has gone to the Harewood Artificial Turf Field project, and $2.1 million has gone to the Midtown Water Supply Upgrade project. So that leaves $10,988,000 remaining to be allocated. So, and just a note, these funds sit in a statutory reserve, so there will be interest earned on the balance in this reserve, so there will be a bit of residual money left over that we can use in the future to fund things. But right now, we're just going to talk about the bulk of the money that is available to be allocated. So staff have put forward possible projects to use the funding on, and are recommending that $3,985,000 go to the design commercial project for phases 1 and 2, as were just described in the previous presentation. $3 million would go towards the Maffeo Sutton Park washroom project. $2.5 million would be for to go towards the land purchase for the South End Community Center. And lastly, $1,180,000 would go to complete the Westwood Lake Park Improvement Phase 2 project. So some other projects were considered, such as the NAC Water Feature Project, Loudon Park improvements, and the ENN Trailway lighting, as well as leaving some unallocated funds in the reserve just to address future opportunities or any cost overruns that come in. So the committee can choose to approve all of the recommended projects, some or none, or put forward some projects of your own ideas. So staff are here to answer any questions you have regarding this report.
Thank you very much. In order, Councillors Kesselbrock and Thorpe so far.
Thanks. Through you. Yeah, I think for me, there's some projects like the Mafia Sutton washrooms, and just pulling up here. I guess the first question, with the Westwood Lake Park improvements, I'm not quite clear on what the accessibility, the building that's proposed there, exactly what is that?
Good morning. Through the chair to Councillor Gesselbrock. I'll just flip to the right page here, sorry.
Welcome, Mr. Groot.
Thank you. Yeah, so
Mr. Harding doesn't get his money, will he be mad at you in his absence?
yeah, no, Darcy, or Miss Osborne is acting right now, so that could be directed towards. Again, through you to Councillor Gesselbach, so the accessible building that we're talking about is, if you, the washroom block that's up there right now, it's, you know, it's of a very old vintage, so the idea would be to kind of repurpose that existing washroom block into more of a utilitarian storage or what have you for special events up there, and actually put an accessible universal washroom facility closer to the Phase 1 parking lot, and then have that kind of become a area that is connected between the Phase 1 parking lot and the Phase 2 improvements that we're currently doing some design work for.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, like I think just in terms of adding more buildings onto some of the parklands, I'd be more in favor of repurposing the current building to see if that can be made more accessible and meet the accessibility requirements for washrooms. And I think so. With the Mafia Sutton washrooms and the Westwood Lake Park improvements, I'd prefer to see more active transportation infrastructure prioritized with this funding. So I'm not in support of the current recommendation. You know, at the very least, I'd like to see the lighting project of the ENN trail in there. I know that one's been kicked down the path of a few, and it's been sort of on the books. And I'm also hoping to see a bit just on the minimum grid of, I know we've spoken to this at our last capital planning, of, you know, what sections are we missing in terms of, you know, making a link between downtown, VIU, the hospital and the north end, and prioritizing those with some of this money. So those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe.
Well, thanks, Your Worship, and I'm not sure how Council wants to handle this recommendation. I think all of these projects are extremely worthwhile, and so it's tough decisions. We've just heard about the commercial design project, which I think we're all excited about. To my mind, I hear continually about the need for upgrades to the Maffeo Sutton Park washrooms, which are quite disgraceful, unfortunately. So I would certainly support that. It's such a well-used facility on our waterfront. The South End Community Centre, Council's identified as a main priority. Westwood Lake improvements, I hear continually how people are pleased with Phase 1 of that and want us to get on with Phase 2, so I certainly would support that. And a couple of the other possible projects as well. They're all very worthwhile. So I'm happy to wait and hear where discussion goes, but I would be prepared to support the recommendations that we have in front of us, but again, I'll let others speak first.
Thank you. Councillor Perino, and then Councillor Eastmere.
Thank you, Your Worship, and a question through you.
Councillor Armstrong. Don't worry, haven't forgotten you.
Oh, sorry, okay. I'm just a little confused, and I apologize. I'm just not quite sure. So when we talk about the design commercial project, so Phase 1 and Phase 2, so that additional 3.985 million, that's not just for the design? Okay, that's to complete it, right? So it's what sort of is already allocated, so that would be the extra to complete the two. Okay, I love that idea. I think that's great. And I agree with Councillor Thorpe. I mean, I certainly agree with Councillor Gesselbach on the, you know, the lighting, but, you know, Maffeo Sutton Park is our premier park. I mean, that is just the center point of our city, and you know, so many families spend time down there. I just think it's an important piece to have that washroom updated, because it's so appalling that, you know, you don't want to take your children and grandchildren in to use it. That is desperately needed. Of course, the South End, there's no discussion. Of course we have to, you know, if we're going to get going on that project, of course we have to get going. And the same with Westwood Lake. I mean, I'd love to be able to repurpose the building that we already have there, but I think you're going to need to have new washrooms built. I mean, when it's busy, it's busy. I mean, there's two options. You use the washroom or you're using the lake. And thank you. I'd much prefer people use the washrooms. So I love that. I love that you have picked these projects, and I'm very much in favor I'll be very supportive of this. I'd love to be able to do more if we could, but let's face it, there's only so much. But these are very good choices. I think staff have made some excellent suggestions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Eastmere, then Councillor Armstrong, and Councillor Hemmons.
Just for some clarity on the Westwood Lake Park improvements, like if we're looking at $3 million for the Maffeo Sutton Park washrooms, I'm assuming that washrooms for Westwood are going to be in the same range, right? And have we planned to budget for that? And this is really just to pivot the use of the current washroom building?
Great question, and through the chair to Councillor Eastmere. So the amount that we suggested for Maffeo comes from in 2009 and 10, there was a process where the washroom / amenity building concession structure was designed to a Class D estimate. And so back then, in about 2011, the Class D estimate was about $2 million. So in conversations that we've had internally and just the way that the market has been lately, we wanted to put a little bit of a larger amount than what was planned for in 2010, but still needing to look at that design, look at city plan, the reimagined process, the integrated action plan, see what was designed back then, is it still relevant? And then some of the other internal conversations that we're having are, is there a possibility to do some repurposing of the Lions Pavilion and some upgrades there, because it's the park's performance space, so it'd be interesting to try to integrate that. So really it's nothing like a Class D estimate or anything like that. It's really just looking at what was designed back then to build a smaller scope of washroom, but larger than, say, what we would be doing at Westwood Lake. Westwood Lake would be more along the lines of what was built at Neck Point Park, but some more fixtures within the accessible universal washroom blocks.
What is a Class D estimate? Sorry.
It's a level of confidence of a cost estimate, like plus or minus 40%. So the cost estimate Class D back then was $2 million, but it could have been 40% high or it could be 40% low. So it's not a very, it's an estimate based on almost conceptual design. No detailed design was done at that time.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think this list is certainly things that I'm interested in seeing move forward. I wish that Loudon Park was maybe on this list, because that's another piece, and there's a concentration of things sort of in the downtown area or the south end on this list. And I know that's another piece that a lot of people are keen to see move forward to facilitate the use of Long Lake more. So, but otherwise, I think that's a good list. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Armstrong, please.
Thank you. I'm very much in favor of this list. I understand Councillor Griswold's points as well. However, for the accessibility community, Westwood Lake was very important for them, because right now there is no place for them to use washrooms, etc. So they were very excited to see that we were looking further in that. And as others have said, we need the washrooms at Maffeo Sutton Parks, and the other two are important to the community. So I'm in favor of the list and will be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hemmons and Councillor Manley.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move the recommended motion.
Seconded, Councillor Perino.
I'll be brief and say I think anytime we can improve our park amenities, that is a win for our entire community. The design commercial project looks great. Happy to hear about the engagement there. The only piece that I hesitated on in terms of the ENN lighting is we could borrow more money to purchase the land for the South End Community Centre instead of dividing it, but I also feel I'm happy to support it as is, because that's something we can consider in future. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Manley.
Thank you, Your Worship. And yeah, very interesting projects. Got a bit of sticker shock from the design commercial project, I must say. I think it's a lot of money, and I do agree, like the ENN land, the lighting along that trail would be really useful and important, and there's just not enough money for everything that we want to do, unfortunately, including dealing with our affordable housing crisis. And I know we're going to be doing some partnership with BC Housing on addressing some of those issues. With the washrooms in Maffeo Sutton Park, are they going into the same location, or is it moving?
Through the chair to Councillor Manley. So that's going to be part of the re-review, because there were several options that were looked at or concepts back in 2009, 2010. And so really looking at that to see if that still makes sense. The utility corridor that was created in advance, so when the park was redone, there was, you know, power, water, sewer brought to an edge, like a different edge of the park, like more closer to the water past the washroom block, because it was intended that the washroom block that exists now would stay in use while the new facility would be built, and then that would be removed, and then thus enlarging the area around the Spirit Square, the tent that's there. Right. So long-winded answer to the location is still going to be reviewed and then confirmed with community and council.
But potentially it could be in behind the pavilion.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I'd love to see the pavilion get an acoustic makeover, you know, just so that you don't have that echo when you have performers in there, and it could be a bit of a tin can. Yeah, I think that's I'm going to support it as well. It's unfortunate that we don't have more money to go around for more things. I think the washroom up at Westwood, I know for Maffeo Sutton Park, it's super important. You go to large events, community events there, and there's a huge lineup for the washrooms, and it's not really acceptable. And I think the washrooms at Westwood Lake are the same washrooms I used when I was a little kid. So I don't want to talk about how long ago that was, but it's a while back, and I'd like to see them be more accessible for the community. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Armstrong. Councillor Armstrong, I can see your hand is down. For what it's worth, and I'll begin in response to Councillor Gesselbrock's comments about the in trailway lighting. It would enhance it, and I would normally support it if we had piles of money, but at the end of the day, somebody can carry their own light. But someone who needs to use a washroom down at Sutton Maffeo or Westwood Lake, there is no alternative. There's nothing they can do for self-help there that would be acceptable public behavior. So I think that makes it easier for me to simply support the staff recommendations and the motion. I appreciate the challenges here, but you know, our downtown is our downtown. It's, as I've said many times before, nobody comes to a city to see their suburbs. They come to see the downtown. And we have nearly 400 people from across this country at the Indigenous Aquaculture and Fisheries Conference. And, you know, their experience here is important. So improving the downtown, I think, is good economically. It's good for community spirit, and it's good for the businesses that Councillor Thorpe referred to earlier. The Maffeo Sutton Park washrooms, I don't have to gild the lily by stating the obvious that's been stated many times by other council members. The South End Community Centre, a high growth area of our community, has been waiting for this for a very long time. And the Westwood Lake Park improvements, Lord knows that they've all been received very well by the public. You know, you don't often get a lot of complimentary letters, candidly, as we well know, but Westwood certainly has, and so it makes sense. So I'm satisfied with the motion as it is and the recommendations of staff, and I much appreciate the work that's gone into it, because I'm sure it's just as challenging for staff when they're preparing the list and deciding who gets support and who doesn't. So, any further discussion? If not, the motion on the floor is the recommended motion. All those in favor? Councillors Eastmere, Hemmons, Mayor Krogh, Councillors Thorpe, Perino, Manley, and Armstrong, and opposed, Councillor Gesselbrock. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Much appreciate the time on that one. The next is the sustainable procurement update.
Your Worship, could I just, before we move on to the next item, I just wanted to be sure, especially for anybody watching, that this wasn't a list of these projects are going ahead and the other ones are not moving forward. No. Obviously, there's all of these projects are in your action plan, and later this fall, you're going to have further discussions about your capital budget, and there'll be opportunity for things like the ENN Trail, for example, that are not currently in the 5-year plan, where council can have a decision point about, is that something you want to add in there? So it's not the end of these other projects. It's just today trying to get some clarity around how we're going to allocate these funds, and we appreciate council's direction on that.
Mr. Lindsay, there's a reason we made you our CIO. Your political antennae are excellent this morning. Thank you.
There's a quick question.
Councillor Gesselbrock has a question.
Thank you. Through you, I didn't see in the report, is there a deadline for us to spend this funds?
Through the chair to Councillor Gesselbrock, we have 5 years
Okay,
from the date of receipt. So all of the work would have to be done by March of 2028.
It's got to be completed by 2020. Okay, thank you.
Very good. Good morning. Now, Ms. Mercer, are you introducing this? I take it, but then...
Yes, so it's been 2 years since the city's sustainable procurement policy came into effect. And so a lot of hard work and effort went into creating that policy. And this report is a means to update council on the progress that has been made during the last year. So I'm going to hand it over to Ms. Rushton to give a brief overview of the highlights of our progress over the last year.
Ms. Rushton, good morning and welcome. Thank you for coming.
Council. Oh, yeah. Sorry, can you hear me? I'm not here often, so forgive the choppiness. I'm really pleased to be here today to introduce to you the 2023 Sustainable Procurement Update. Again, I'm Jane Rushton, Manager of Purchasing and Stores, and it's my pleasure to highlight some of the achievements and progress made during the time period of July 1st, 2022 through to June 30th, 2023. As Ms. Laura indicated, a quick summary of previous progress. The city launched the Sustainable Procurement Policy in February of 2021, which gave purchasing the mandate to follow through on integrating the city's values and on sustainability into procurement decisions. Staff continue to encourage the integration of sustainability elements in our published documents. However, it should be noted that purchasing was short-staffed during this reporting period, so the statistical numbers are likely lower than one would like to see. But we have moved the dial, and the achievements include the following. New buyers to the city took the training and are keen to encourage departments to include sustainable procurement elements in their documents, and previously trained buyers participated in other sessions to expand their knowledge base. Other municipalities across British Columbia and Canada are taking interest and reaching out to Nanaimo to obtain information on our program and to kickstart or restart their own. We again participated in the Canadian Collaboration for Sustainable Procurement Benchmarking Report and made 2 small improvements to the city's overall program. The first in advancing the high-impact procurement opportunities, yes, we call them HIPPOs, this list where we were able to publish and award opportunities previously identified to council. And the second was establishing key performance indicators to measure progress, which we now include as a standard in our reporting. Published opportunities from this time period solicited bids from vendors who were not exposed to the Sustainable Procurement Program in the previous year. New vendors submitted on the city's opportunities and have put forward their responses to sustainable criteria. Under trade agreement requirements, vendors who are not successful on opportunities have the right to request a debrief, and we are conducting these and providing the compiled feedback on all criteria, inclusive of the sustainable procurement elements, to highlight the importance of providing a fulsome response and how best to align with the city's strategic plan. Where appropriate, the city has replaced the low bid proposition documents with a negotiated request for proposal for construction-related projects, and in these we are including sustainable procurement criteria. This in turn gives the contractors the ability to submit their sustainable stories and receive feedback on where they can improve if they are not successful. Included in the report are project-specific achievements. Sadly, purchasing published only 9 opportunities with sustainable criteria as opposed to the 16 the previous year, and these opportunities received only 34 bids in response as opposed to the 56 submissions the previous year. The good news story here, however, is that only 3 bids neglected to respond to the sustainable criteria as opposed to the 10 the previous year. Too early to call it a trend, but we are hopeful. The report also captures the success of projects that were awarded in our first reporting period, July 1st, 2021 to June 30th, 2022. City project managers were keen to share the results of the vendors' activities to showcase the final outcomes of the initially published requirements. And finally, The success story highlighted in the report is one that we put forward for the Canadian Collaboration for Sustainable Procurement publication, which highlights the vendor community's willingness to support sustainability. The result is that future opportunities for this commodity will raise the bar even higher to further reduce vendor waste, impacts, and carbon footprint. And that concludes my introduction. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Ms. Rushton. Much appreciated. Councillor in order, Councillors Gesselbrock and Manley.
Great, thank you. It was great to read the story that was published in the Canadian group
CCSP.
And my question, I'm just looking at the publication that sort of has like the circles that are filled in or half circles and that, and just in terms of Nanaimo's program rollout of this, what's sort of the next steps in terms of what we're working on to tackle to expand it and complete it?
Through the chair to Councillor Gesselbrock, thank you for the question. We have yet to identify what we're going to tackle for 2024. Again, our main priority is to keep our staff levels up, but we can see improvements in the few improvements that we made in the last reporting period. You can see, we call it a moon chart, but we have areas where we can improve. Again, the HIPPO list is always near and dear because that gives us that opportunity to reach out to the vendor community. And that vendor community outreach is very important because it's not just the city being ready, it's them being as ready as well. Training and engagement, of course, is very near and dear to me because we need the departments to be ready as well. So I'm spitballing here. I think those are going to be my two highest, but we do meet with internally with all departments, and they help guide and inform where they're going with their achievements or their goals. So it would be nice to be in alignment, and I'll have more to report in the next year.
Okay, great. And just to follow up on that, just in terms of staffing to be able to run the program, how are we doing in sort of that area? Is it just in terms of like there's been quite a lot of staff turnover, or is it do you need more resources as well?
Well, through the chair, I never say no to more resources, but we are struggling in maintaining the existing numbers that we need. The opportunities that the HR opportunities have been long-standing, and the talent pool is very shallow. So we look to keep the numbers up and keep the staff that we've got.
Mm-hmm. Great. And just with the staffing, like, is it something that is there opportunity to, I mean, I think this is an important program, and I think we want to make sure that it's supported and resourced. And so, as we're going into this next budget, what council can do to support it. And I guess my question was sort of like the staffing challenges, what resulted in sort of less sort of procurement opportunities that were put out this year compared to last year? Because it was quite a dramatic change from 50 down to 9, I think, or something like that.
Through your worship to Councillor Gesselbrock. So in the upcoming budget, for the upcoming budget cycle, we are looking at some staffing options that we will hopefully present to you at that time. So that is something we are looking at. The department has to get procurements out the door. So it's just, if you have to do those same number with less people, you just have less opportunity to enhance a process. So we're hoping that with, keeping our current staffing and potentially adding to it gives it more horsepower to focus on improvements to process. So that is in our goal. That is our goal to, you know, make sure there is momentum keeping on with this program. We just need to, you know, the market is competitive, and, you know, it is hard to find really qualified staff. So it is something that is our focus, but this one.
Absolutely, I think it's a challenge on all things, and hopefully we can draw people to this, given the added meaning with the procurement, the impact that it can have to improve things, that we can attract some people that are keen to make a difference and work hard. But I appreciate the effort that's been put in and the challenges that are faced, and thanks so much for the report.
Thank you. I apologize, Mr. Lindsay. I think you may have had your hand up for a while, and I haven't noticed till now.
I did, Your Worship, but that was
and
previous item, so my apologies.
Oh, sorry, and I'm just going to point out for the next meeting, still shows as Jake over there, and it's certainly not Jake anymore, so we can get the screen corrected.
We can only blame stuff on him for so long, Your Worship. So we'll have to get that changed.
Councillor Manley.
Thank you, Your Worship. As they say, everything's just Jake around here. Yeah, thank you for the report. All of these priorities are really important in terms of ensuring that we're not exploiting workers or the environment in other locations. We have really good standards in Canada. And of course, local employment and supporting local business is really important for our own local economy. I'm just curious about, there's thresholds with different trade agreements. We have a sort of plethora of agreements that we have to adhere to. And I'm just wondering, do we look at those thresholds in terms of when we're opening up for bids, or are we just kind of ignoring what those thresholds are? I can't remember what they are. I think it's with the Comprehensive Economic Trade Agreement with the European Union is the one that's most restrictive on municipalities. But do you have a comment about that, about what the thresholds are and how close we go to the line with them in terms of procurement dollars?
Through the chair to Councillor Manley, thank you for the question. The thresholds are very near and dear to me, very near and dear. So we use the U.S. Partnership Trade Agreement thresholds. They are the most stringent for our area, and I do hold staff's feet to the fire. So $75,000 for goods and services, that's our maximum upset limit. $200,000 for construction, absolute upset limit. And yes, thank you for the question.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate trying to keep as much business in town as we can and in the local economy. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm not seeing any other questions. Ms. Rushton, much appreciate your attendance here this morning. Ms. Mercer. The next item is the British Columbia Social Procurement Initiative. Ms. Mercer.
Thank you. So the British Columbia Social Procurement Initiative, or as an acronym, BCSPI, I don't know there's so many acronyms, and it is a collaborative program that supports local governments and other public purchasers across BC by providing capacity building, training, tools, and expertise required to integrate social procurement best practices into existing procurement policies. So the city has been a member of BCSPI since 2019 and has utilized the training, tools, and peer exchange opportunities offered through the membership. So BCSPI is looking for provincial funding to continue operations for the next 3 to 5 years, and have asked that council add their name to the letter they're going to send to the province to request funding. Now, they have requested funding before, but have been declined, so now they're hoping that they can send another request with members adding their names to the letter. So staff are recommending that the mayor, on behalf of council, sign the letter that will go to the province. So we're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Councillor Perino.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I would be prepared to move the motion, but I just have a quick question. So the financial implication for us is for 2023, am I reading that right? 10,581? Okay, and what does that go for then? Just to their pot, kind of? Okay.
Yes, and it gives, like I say, it gives us access to training tools, other municipalities or organizations to brainstorm. There are workshops and those kind of things
Okay.
that we have access to.
Okay, I'd be prepared to move the motion.
Please, so moved. Seconded, Councillor Hemmons. Any discussion, questions? Not seeing any. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. I'm thinking that the debt management policy may take a little while, and we're close to the time for the scheduled break, so maybe we take the morning break. I see the Director of Legislative Services nodding her head in agreement, so I know I'm on the right track. The next item on the agenda is the debt management policy. Ms. Mercer, Ms. Fulham, good morning, please, again. Once more with feeling.
Yeah. So staff first introduced the draft debt management policy back in March of 2019. However, due to the pandemic, work was stalled until earlier this year. So at the March 15th Finance and Audit Committee meeting, staff brought back the policy and asked for the committee's feedback. So the purpose of this policy, to remind everybody, is to establish responsible governance for the city's debt management, establish roles and responsibilities, define principles and objectives of debt management, and ensure the city's debt management is compliant with statutory and legal requirements and is in accordance with the Canadian public sector accounting standards. So at the meeting, the committee was asked to consider two items. The first being, is council satisfied to leave the maximum allowable borrowing limit as outlined in the community charter, or would it like to have a lower limit? So some communities have chosen to choose a lower maximum borrowing limit for their community. They're more debt averse, so they would prefer to have a lower ceiling. What we heard from the committee was that you would prefer to leave it at the maximum level under the community charter. So currently our maximum is $51.9 million. So this means that the city can have up to $51.9 million in annual debt repayments. So that's principal and interest payments each year. So our current annual repayment totals are $7.2 million, or 13.8% of that total allowable limit. The second question was, is council in agreement that even if the city is within its assent-free zone, all long-term borrowing will require electoral approval? So the committee at that time took no issue with that. So the policy reflects that all long-term borrowing will require electoral approval. So the city's auditors have reviewed the policy and have taken no issue with it. So we are here today asking that the committee recommend that council approve the policy. So we'll be happy to answer any questions you may.
Thank you very much. And if I can lead off, for practical purposes, I mean, we have the policy, and it certainly looks good to me for my limited understanding. Has it been pretty much the practice in any event in terms of the way the city has carried out its financial practices?
Yes. This is just formalizes all of the processes, and at a future date, if a council came in that was more debt adverse, they could completely come in and say, we'd like a lower limit of X dollars. So this just really formalizes our process of how we handle debt.
And I think it's fair to say, and the public will probably not pay much attention to this, that, you know, the city has been very prudently managed through many previous councils, so that we are spending so little of the revenue on debt servicing, which I don't think many people appreciate. Now, there's an argument to be made we should be spending a lot more and we should have more infrastructure in place as a result, but that's an ongoing topic for everybody. Next, Councillor Perino, please.
Thank you, Your Worship, and a question to you through you to Ms. Mercer. So I agree absolutely with the statement is council in agreement that even if the city is within the assent-free zone, all long-term borrowing will require electoral approval. I absolutely agree. What is the assent-free zone amount? Or, because I can't remember, I thought we always had to go to the electoral if it was over. I thought it was 5 million, but I'm sorry, I can't remember.
There is that, through your worship to Councillor Perino, there's the short-term borrowing that we can do.
Yes.
That we don't need electoral approval
Right.
for, and that is just under the $5 million. I'm going to have Ms. Fulla comment on the assent-free zone. Oh, and she doesn't have that answer. So we can get that information for you.
I
She
can't
has
believe
the
you
answer.
knew everything. You
I
knew
know.
everything.
I
don't
should have really
understand.
prepared that. I should have anticipated that question. And we can get that for you. If my memory serves, it's not a high amount of money.
No.
And once you get to a certain level of debt, that amount that you can have assent-free shrinks. So it isn't a lot of money.
Okay.
So, but the philosophy is that if you're asking the public to commit to a long-term
Yes.
repayment process, they really should have a say in it.
Absolutely. But I guess, so part of my question was, what's that line at? Like, what amount do we then go always to the public? Given that we approve this, what amount do we always go to the public? Or is there a set amount? Do we just take it as per project? I mean.
Yes. So through your worship, it isn't a dollar amount.
Okay.
It's how long you want to borrow.
Okay, I got you.
So anything 5 years and under is considered short term.
Yes.
And anything over 5 years is considered long
Yes.
term.
Good, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gesselbrock.
Thanks, Your Worship. Just with that, do we set, or is it legislated, the 5% threshold? Like if we go above 5% of our sustainable revenues, we have to go out for public assent?
Through your worship to Councillor Gesselbrock, that is, the calculation for that maximum is set by legislation.
Okay.
So we cannot change that limit. We can only lower it. So the calculation is set by the province under the community.
We can never borrow more than that 5% of our sustainable revenue.
Well, there's a couple of things in the calculation, but that being the biggest component of it, yes.
Okay.
So whatever that maximum is, we cannot go beyond that based on the calculation set out by the province.
Yeah. And there's been a few emails and inquiries about sort of the AAP versus referendum. Is there different thresholds for that, or AAP or referendum satisfy the need for public assent?
That's correct. Whatever mechanisms we choose to get electoral approval, it satisfies the criteria.
Okay, and so that's solely to council's discretion which one we choose.
Yes.
And do we have any policy around those two items?
I'll let
Whether
Ms.
we go to
Curry
referendum
answer
or
that
AAP?
question.
Thank you, Worship. Through you to Council Gesselbrock. There is no policy in that. It is basically approval of the electors can either be obtained through an alternative approval process or assent of the electors, otherwise known as a referendum. It is a decision point that has to be made for each item. So each time we go for long-term borrowing and or removal of park dedication, those things that require electoral approval, it's not just long-term borrowing that would require approval of the electors. It is council's purview and decision point to make what process that they choose to go with, either the AAP or referendum. The province and the legislation guide those processes, both of them. So you don't get to set how those proceedings get done or how those processes get done. You just get to choose what process you intend to go with. The province also has guidelines and best practices on what to consider when making that decision between an alternative approval process or a referendum, which we did go over, and council did consider those things when deciding most recently the alternative approval process for the Nanaimo Operations Center, whether there are services that are required to maintain service levels and community services in the city. An AAP is more favorable in the sense that should it fail and more than 10% of the electorate respond respond in the negative, then you still have the option to proceed by going to a referendum. So the door's not closed on that subject matter, and for something like a public service or services that are required to maintain service levels in the city of Nanaimo, you don't really want to close that door right away. So an AAP allows you to go through that process and not have the door closed and proceed to a referendum. A referendum, should it fail, like the one we had a few years ago for the event center, that door's closed unless or until you come back later with a different proposal, a different amount of borrowing, and alter it in some way, and then you could go to a referendum again. And then also the considerations that you take into account is the costs. So referendums are the same cost as an election, except they're more because you don't have that cost sharing with the school district, and a assent vote is a lot more economical.
Right. And just one more on that. Are you aware of, do other municipalities or jurisdictions have policy around just that sort of more clearly outline when a city chooses to go to AAP or to referendum? I think, you know, there's some criticism. It's just that it's not really clear on that, and you know, can be politically motivated what direction is decided. And I'm just curious, is there more policy that's been built around this in other places? Something that we should consider.
Through your worship to Councillor Gesselbrock, not that I'm aware of, because what I believe is we could have those guiding, like a policy that guides best practices and gives those examples for council to consider. But I do believe that decision, unfortunately, is a political one that has to be made for each instance. There could be policies guiding those best practices and things for you to consider. And maybe point to. However, I don't know of any municipalities that currently have those. I could look into that, though.
Great. No, thanks for the information.
Thank you, Councillor Himmons and Councillor Manley.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll make the recommended motion.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. Speak to it? No? Okay. Councillor Manley.
Thank you. A quick question through you, Your Worship. I'm curious about a project like the Midtown water supply. There's a $50 million project, and if we get hit with something like that was an unexpected project based on a water main breaking, and then the need to fast track that construction. Did that go to an AAP, or was that long-term borrowing, or was that short-term borrowing? How do we deal with something like that? And if we had a similar situation in the future, would we, under this policy, have to go to get electoral approval for some kind of urgent situation like that?
Through your worship to Councillor Manley, so currently, as you're aware, the Midtown Water Supply Project does not have borrowing as a funding source. Had it been anticipated, hindsight's 2020, had we realized that it was going to get to this point, we probably would have considered borrowing as an option under that. Our first line of attack, if something came up, is that we would go to reserves first to fund anything. However, if it was a large dollar amount, like, you know, tens of millions of dollars, then we would have to look at other options and see what criteria we would have to follow at that time.
Okay. Well, thank you. I support both of these, so happy to vote for them. And I think we've had prudent staff recommendations in the past and prudent councils in the past, and nobody's run up the tab in a huge way. And I think any long-term borrowing should get some approval from electors. And I think in part of that question is about need to have and want to have kind of things, and whether we go to a referendum on things that we'd like to have, rather than, you know, an alternative approval process for things that we have to have, because there's, yeah, makes sense. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm not seeing Ms. Fuller. Sorry.
Yes, I just followed up on Council's question about the assent-free zone, and it's 5% of controllable revenues. So our limit is 25%, and we're in the assent-free portion if we're at 5% or lower.
It's a lovely phrase, the assent-free portion.
Yeah.
Doesn't stink. Not seeing any further questions, further discussion, motions on the floor have been seconded. All those in favor? And any contrary? None. Motion carries. Thank you very much. The next is item H, quarterly budget transfer report. Ms. Mercer.
I promise this is my last one, then someone else can speak today. As a requirement of our budget transfer policy is to disclose to council when a transfer results in a new project over $75,000. The transfer is over $100,000 or a delay or cancellation of a project results. So previously, as I mentioned, an information report was required each time one of these circumstances arose. And in an effort to be more efficient, we've now gone to a quarterly report summarizing all of the items that have met this criteria. So details there are 4 instances in the third quarter of 2023 where the transfers have met this criteria, and details of each instance are outlined in the report, and staff are here to answer any questions you might have about those projects. The mics are not working.
I just wonder if you moved closer, Councillor Hemmons, would it work then, or is it just something is off with your microphone?
Yep. Thank you. Thank you.
Let's do this.
Yeah.
Ms. Bonagle's on it. She's got somebody coming.
You gonna try? Oh, look.
There we are.
I'm live.
Brilliant.
There you go.
Thank you.
Special privilege.
Use your inside-outside voice.
Okay. I just a quick question about the Comox Road paving, Wall Street to Wallace. Can we not take that right down to Terminal? Because I don't know if you've driven that little block between Wallace and Terminal, but there is one heck of a set of moguls there. And if you're taking any speed at all, that's hard on the shocks, that one. I was the one place in town I know that's really, the street's really rough. But.
Mr. Stewart, good morning.
Good morning. Through your worship to Councillor Manley, that the naming is a bit off, actually. That we are going up to that intersection, but we are doing the worst spot that you've mentioned, the moguls, as a patch there. So we're not doing the full rehab in that section. We're going to patch that, cut that out, replace it when it gets done. So absolutely, we noticed that as well.
Okay, good to know. Thank you.
Yeah.
Very good. Any other questions on this particular item? Seeing none, thank you very much. Final item is the meal program funding options. Mr. Holm, please. Good morning. And Ms. Wood.
Great. Thank you. Good morning, Your Worship and committee. So now for something completely different and very important, obviously, critical service that the city is helping to support the needs of the most vulnerable through supporting our nonprofit partners in providing a breakfast meal program. I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Wood, who works with those partners to fill that need, to explain what's presented here.
Thank you very much. Ms. Wood, please.
Thank you. So the staff report before the Finance and Audit Committee provides an update on the current city-funded breakfast meal program and provides some suggestions for the continued support for a more permanent meal program. So as the committee is aware, the 710 Club Society operated a breakfast meal program for many, many years out of the old city-owned community services building, which has now become a permanent supportive housing site. Since that time, the 710 Club has not been able to reestablish in another location. Between September 2021 and December 2021, the city provided bridge funding from the Daytime Resource Center budget until an alternative breakfast meal program was identified. In addition, with strengthening communities and services program funds, the city was able to continue funding the breakfast meal program between November 2022 and August 2023, with the Daytime Resource Center budget providing funding until November 10th of this year, 2023. In May, the breakfast meal program moved to a distributed model, with the Salvation Army doing the meal preparations and the 710 Club distributing the meals. And this has unfortunately increased the cost of the program. Between November 2022 and August 2023, just to give you guys an idea, 26,589 breakfast meals were prepared by the Salvation Army. And since May, the 710 Club distributes up to 100 meals daily at 2 locations, Monday to Friday at Caledonia Park in conjunction with the shower program, and 7 days per week at the overdose prevention site at 250 Albert Street. The committee will also see that in the attachment A, the report provides an overview of all the emergency meal programs that are available to unsheltered and precariously housed individuals as well. So to date, the 710 Club Society and Salvation Army has not secured any other funding to extend the breakfast meal program past November 10th, and they've not been able to identify an indoor location to bring those meals inside. It costs approximately $36,270 monthly to fund the existing breakfast meal program in the distributed model. So as directed by council, a letter was sent on September 15th to the Minister of Social Development and Poverty Reduction and the Minister of Housing requesting funding support for the breakfast meal program. To my knowledge to date, we haven't received a response as of yet. In addition, it's important to note that new this year, the Reaching Home Grant Program is recognizing input with people with lived experience. They held a consultation session back in June where they consulted with people with living experience. And one of the highest ranked options that they hoped for was more access to drop-in spaces where they could access meals, showers, laundry, warming services. So the application reflected that, as well as some of the funding was determined for client-based services, which would include basic needs services such as this. So the call for proposals for Reaching Home Grant Program closed on September 27th, with successful applicants being notified by the end of November. And the funds would be available to those successful applicants by April 1st, 2024. At this time, staff are recommending that council allocate $60,000 to the breakfast meal program to extend the services to December 31st. So this would use $52,880 of the remaining funds from the Daytime Resource Center budget and $7,120 from the Strategic Infrastructure Reserve Fund. And this extension will allow time for response from the Ministers of Social Development and Poverty Reduction and Housing, and will also reveal the outcomes of the Reaching Home Grant Program. So at this point, I'm happy to answer any questions that the committee may have.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hemmons, please.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Ms. Woods, for your report and your work on this. Such a difficult file when people don't have enough to eat, like at a very basic level. The Salvation Army and the 710 Club have not secured funding. Have they sought funding?
Through your worship, to Councillor Hemmons, I know in my conversations with reps from 710 and Salvation Army is pretty preoccupied with some of the challenges that they're having down at the location with some of the demolition and the building. So they haven't really been looking for funding at this point. There unfortunately is no provincial funding that's available for this type of program. It's something like the Strengthening Communities Fund that we had access to before. And I do know that the 710 Club Society actively looks for locations all the time. It's difficult to find a location that is appropriate for this kind of use, but also that will lease to this type of use as well.
Thank you. And I probably know the answer to this, but do we have any way of knowing if the Reaching Home applicants were related to meal programming? Like, I'm hearing you say that it was identified that spaces with meals and laundry, et cetera, but do we know that any of the applicants are pushing for that?
Through your worship, to Councillor Hemmons, I don't have knowledge about what the type of applications that have come through. You know, I do know that sitting at the Nanaimo Community Allocations Board, the basic needs services has been talked about quite a bit. And if the committee is aware, every year the CAB actually works to distribute percentages of funds based on need. And client-based services, which this type of program would fall under, has the most designated funds to that area.
Okay, so just getting my head around this, we have two organizations who currently don't have a location to feed people, but they're receiving city funding to do outreach. We have an opportunity here to continue that funding to the end of the year, but we're not sure whether our community as a whole is going to respond with funding using the Reaching Home fundings for meal programming.
Yes, through your worship, that's correct. And that's why the report also says that staff could come back with a report in December providing an update.
Okay, thank you. I'm in support of the motion. I won't move it. I see other people on the speakers list, but yeah, I just want to say really this is hard to say we're going to maybe fund it till the end of December. That's only 8 weeks away, or sorry, you know, it's very close. Difficult decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. In order, Councillors Eastmer, Thorpe, Gesselbrock, and Perino, and Manley.
Thank you. Through you to staff, thank you for this report. So if we fund it until the end of the year and wait to find out if we get Reaching Home dollars to support further continuation of this, then we still have a gap until April to when that money would start flowing, right?
Through your worship to Councillor Eastmer, yes, there would be a gap that wouldn't have funds identified between January 1st to April.
Yeah, I think that's a huge concern for me, and just knowing that even if we fund this, that is an issue going forward. And I'm glad that Councillor Hemmons asked the question about whether funding has been sought by these organizations to continue this work, because I think that is a crucial part of it. And I hear you say that the 710 Club is constantly looking for locations. My understanding when we passed the motion that I put forward to initially extend the funding was that the systems planning organization was going to be consulted on this as well to see if they have some partners around that table who have virtually empty buildings. Were they consulted at all on this?
Through your worship to Councillor Eastmer, I know that their staff and maybe Mr. Holm or Mr. Lindsay can speak a little bit because I'm not always in the meetings with the SPO, but there has been lots of conversation. The SPO also sits at the CAB meetings as well, and so lots of conversation about this gap around a permanent meal program. And as I mentioned, the consultation that we're seeing is that, you know, it's not just meals, it's showers, it's laundry, it's warming center services as well. And so I think there's a bigger conversation that the SPO is trying to pull forward, and I think the committee may be aware that they will be coming to council to have some of the discussions around warming center, which would include other basic needs services in there.
My understanding, though, is with the warming center conversation that we're going to be having on the 23rd, the reality is that we don't have any funding for warming centers this winter. Is that correct?
Through your worship to Councillor Eastmer, we don't have the Strengthening Communities Services Program funding like we did last year for general daytime warming. I think there's basically 3 different streams, and of course the municipality would always have access to our emergency management and climate readiness funds to be able to respond in an extreme cold weather event, but we don't have access to that general daytime warming like we did last year.
Thank you. Yeah, it's just overall, I think we're heading into a pretty dire situation, and I think even our attempts to get ahead of it with the motion last year to ask the SPO for some support on finding locations, like I just feel like we're somehow further behind than we were last year, and I know that's absolutely not staff's fault. Like it's a virtue of the system that we have right now. And when I look at the list of the meal programs that are available in Nanaimo, like trying to figure out, okay, this one's available 1 day a week at this location, this one's available 1 day a week at another location, but for a smaller group of people, like I would need a personal assistant to be able to get to these. And I just raise my hands to organizations like the Wisteria Community Association that is out there every night, you know, delivering up to 300 meals for people who are unhoused. Like, that is just incredible work that they're able to do with really limited resources. And I, just knowing that we're hopefully going to fund this continuation of the breakfast meal program, but this is for people who don't have a dry place to eat their meal, and they've been out in the rain all night and will be out in the rain all day. It's just, yeah, it's a heartbreaking situation, and I just would implore the community, if you have an empty building that could be used for this, it's just, I think we need to get a little bit more creative and a little bit open-minded about opening our doors to community members in need, just who deserve a dry place to be able to eat a meal at the very least. And then we'll continue to work with BC Housing to get this rapid housing support built, because we really can't wait until, you know, whenever, mid-2024, 2025, to see some of this rapid housing that we really need for people who need a dry place to go. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, a couple of comments or questions. First of all, I appreciate the comments of Councillor Eastmuir regarding the SPO, because that was on my list to ask about. Council has put a lot of effort and money into the formation of SPO, and my understanding was clearly that they were going to be taking the lead in coordinating this type of file and requests, and I'm not aware that Council has heard anything from the SPO since I can recall, so that's a concern of mine, and I would hope that we do hear from them in the near future and find out just what they're doing and what they see as their role in coordinating services. Beyond that, I will support the recommendation for the funding until the end of the year, but I do have concerns going further down the calendar than that, because providing of social services is not the mandate of the city per se, and I hope these organizations are actively looking elsewhere for funding streams. The question that I do have is whether it's Salvation Army or 7-Eleven or other organizations that we could possibly mention, what is in place in terms of accountability back to the city for the use of the funding?
Through your worship to Councillor Thorpe. So we do enter into a service agreement with the 710 and Salvation Army, for instance. And within that service agreement, we do require detailed reporting. So we do ask for statistics around the number of people that they're serving. Also within the service agreement, we do have conditions about being a good neighbor, making sure that they're reporting anything to police or bylaw when appropriate, fire. Also having a radius around when they're delivering program to pick up garbage, and just to really support being a good neighbor in there. So we build that into our service agreement, and they report to us monthly on statistics around the services as well.
All right, thank you. I did want to ask about a good neighbor policy, but you've covered that. And actually financially, the use of the dollars, are we told, does that go to staff? Does it all go to food, or is there a breakdown on how the money is actually used?
Yeah, through your worship to Councillor Thorpe. We do ask for a breakdown. They do provide us a monthly invoice that, so depending on the program, some of the programs provide me with a daily per day cost, and we do break that down as agreed upon in the service agreement. So for instance, the Salvation Army charges $730 a day. And so we do have further breakdown of how that looks like with staff hourly wages and the food costs, but they just invoice us on a daily rate. And then so in the monthly reports, we do get updates, more detailed budgets around what they're spending those funds on.
Thank you. That answers my questions. Thanks.
Councillor Gesselbrock.
Thanks. I'm supportive of the recommendation. I just have a question. Having this sort of like going around and distributing meals, it sounds like it's more expensive to do. Has there been any beneficial aspect of having it done this way, or is it just all around negative and there's like a real need to have a location where it can be distributed and this daytime sort of youth center type concept?
Through your worship to Councillor Gesselbach. I think that there's been pros and cons. For sure, the purpose, especially through the Strengthening Communities Fund, when we wrote the grant to the province, was this idea that folks are outside all night and would be great to bring them inside in the morning for a breakfast meal. So kind of being able to create that warmth, especially during the winter time, I think is, you know, as we come up into that season, we're going to see that more and more challenge. I think some of the benefits have been, you know, delivering the breakfast program in conjunction with other programs means that that food is getting out to more people than it would have been if it was just in one centralized location. But for sure, you know, the warmth of coming inside and having a breakfast meal program probably outweighs the rest, just to be able to have a chance to warm up.
Great, thank you. And you know, I know that there's conversations of more of a coordinated approach and ask around a daytime youth center that has all these services, and I think that I think it's a conversation that council needs to get into and look at how we can support something like that moving forward. And you know, I don't want to get ahead of things, but I think that you know, if we're strategic and proactive about it, I think it could probably help out relieve some pinch points in multiple realms and allow for a more consistent stream of funding that's not always coming back onto the city, because it'll be reliable and in place. So you know, more discussion on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Prino, then Councillor Manley.
Thank you. I should question through you to Ms. Wood. So of the 9 listed groups that serve food, and that's not everybody. That's not everybody in town, is it? Because I'm thinking of the school programs and that kind of thing. I mean, the one, St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church, which does the Wellington High School students and low-income families. But there's a lot more organizations out there that serve food. Is that correct?
Through your worship to Councillor Prino, yes, there are other agencies that provide food, for instance, Loaves and Fishes.
Yes.
This table summary is just really focused on programs that do target more of our unhoused, precariously housed individuals, and that actually do meals rather than just give a box of food.
Gotcha. Okay. So that answers my first question. So when we're talking about the amount of budget money that we're looking at doing today, and I do support the motion, we are not talking about anything other than the 7 to 10 Club and the Salvation Army. That's it. So all of these other groups, the other 7 groups, receive no funding whatsoever.
Through your worship to Councillor Prino, I do believe that they receive funding probably from other sources, but not through the city.
Not through the city. Does that feel, and I apologize for saying it this way, does it feel unfair to the others, or is it simply a cost issue for us? Is that why? Why are we doing the 2 and not the 9, for example? Is it a fair ratio, I guess, of funding?
Yeah, through your worship to Councillor Prino, if you'll recall, when we got the Strengthening Communities Funds, we did do an expression of interest. Yes. And so the expression of interest, of course, was awarded to Salvation Army because they were the only agency that had applied for the funds and had an indoor location at that time. So when we had to move to the distributed model, we actually just went to the other expression of interest to try to create a partnership there. Still at that time, there was no identified location that could bring folks inside. So that's kind of the reason for the distributed model and the reason why 710 and Salvation Army, because they were ones that submitted EOIs to that process.
So do we get complaints from the other groups for not funding them or helping to fund them?
Through your worship to Councillor Prino, I, to my knowledge, I haven't received any, but I may now.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Manley, and then Councillor Eastmere, and at some point we should move the motion.
Well, I'd like to move the motion.
Thank you. Seconded, Councillor Hemmons. Please speak to it.
And I'm happy to support this despite the emails we get from people saying that we should let people on the street bootstrap or die, which I find somewhat appalling that some people have that attitude in this community. We need more supportive housing, affordable housing, treatment facilities, et cetera, et cetera. It's interesting what has come back from people with lived experience about what they're seeking in the community, and I think that's a real need, is to have that kind of hub for people to be able to get warm, have a meal, get their clothes cleaned, have a shower, have proper hygiene, be able to live like dignified human beings. You know, to be able to have a shower and then have a place to stay warm afterwards is really important in these colder weather months. I just have to say that the amount of money that comes into this community from the federal government for this program is pathetic. It's leaving community organizations scrapping over breadcrumbs to figure out how to deal with the crisis that we're in. And yeah, I think we should be advocating to the federal government for a larger share of reaching home dollars. I mean, the fact that capital projects is listed in some of the things you could spend money on, you couldn't buy a house with the money that they give us for this whole community. It's pathetic. So I will support this. I imagine that we're going to be talking about this again at a meeting in mid-December to figure out how we're going to continue to find places to feed people, food to feed people, and ways to ensure that people can survive on our streets until we can get some roofs over people's heads. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Eastmere.
Thank you. Through you, just for clarification, as far as waiting to know if similar programs are funded through the Reaching Home funding program, do we know if, like, the city didn't apply for Reaching Home dollars to continue supporting these programs? Do we have any sense of whether Salvation Army and 710 may have applied for similar dollars?
Through your worship, to Councillor Eastmere, I'm not aware about Salvation Army. I do, to my knowledge, has been reported to me by 710 that they've applied for some funding through Reaching Home, but I'm not privy to the applications that have come through for evaluation.
Thank you. And do you have any sense of what recommendation you might have come 6 weeks from now when the funding runs out, and or do you need time to kind of look at where we may be able to draw more dollars? Because I think this is exhausting our daytime resource center pool that we had reserved.
Your worship, I think part of the answer to that question, I think it's important to remember this started off as the city stepping into a space as kind of a temporary role to fill a void. And I think one of the options that could have been in this report is, like other things that get pushed down to local governments that are very much needed, does this become a permanent line item in your budget? So, you know, that is one way that this could go. I think the space that staff have asked for here is, you have sent a letter to the province and asked for them response. We have not got a response back. We have not seen the outcome of this next round of Reaching Homes, but depending on those, I think there's a decision moving forward. Is this something that we want to limp along with incremental funding, or is it time to do something more significant in your budget? I know there's pros and cons on both sides of that. There's no debate of the need. It's just who's ultimately responsible for this and how do we best fund it.
Thank you. Seeing no further speakers, I think we've wrestled this unanimity. All those in favor? Any opposed? Thank you very much. Much appreciated. That's the last item on the agenda. We have no other business.
Your worship,
Councillor Manning.
I would like to move that we write a letter and advocate to the federal government for more Reaching Home funds for this community.
Second.
Seconded. Any need for debate? All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you very much. No question period.
Motion to adjourn.
Moved by Councillor Perino, seconded by Councillor Hemmons. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you very much to all of staff this morning for the presentations. Much appreciated.